chill. Yeah.
Hello Marvel Legends and welcome to a new episode of Displaying Model Behavior. And as I am off to do, we're trying something different today. We are going to do a top 10 list and a display collection all at once because I like to throw things at the wall and see what sticks. So this is the top 10 Eastenders moments in Marvel Comics. What's an Eastenders moment, I hear you ask? It's a moment that ends an episode and you hear doom, 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 doom. Basically, it's a revelation. It's a WTF moment. It's a bump, bump, bump type moment where you're like, oh my God, what is going to happen next? I got to tune in next week and find out. So, without further ado, I bring you the first Eastenders moment of Marvel Comics, and that is Captain America joins Hydra. Doom, 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 doom. Anyone who's not from England and doesn't watch EastEnders has no idea what this is all about. But here we see Captain America, the Sentinel of Liberty. Why am I sort of looking down while I'm doing this? Well, I'm trying to make sure that the camera focuses on Cap himself and not on my glorious visage. So that's why I'm also wearing the baseball cap. It comes in handy because that way it doesn't notice my face, it just notices the Sentinel of Liberty. This, of course, is the Cap Wolf Captain America figure. And normally I always use the 80th anniversary figure when I'm doing this kind of thing. So I thought I'll mix it up a little bit. So here we go. The first WTF moment. Captain America, if you haven't read the comic, I'm sure you're familiar. It's become quite an iconic sort of image now. Captain America is in a helicopter, and I think it's Jack Flag he's with, and they're just powwowing like, hey, God bless America, aren't we great? And then Captain America kicks Jack Flag out of the helicopter, and he plummets to what we will think will be his death. And Captain America's like, Hail Hydra. You're like, oh, that's a Chris Evans face, isn't it? No, Chris Pratt. Look, and what happened was the cosmic cube, which was, it gained sentience. It sort of became this little girl called Cubic, I think, or something like that. Either way, this little girl, cosmic cube, had been manipulated by the Red Skull. And she thought that basically the Red Skull was a lovely guy and that Hydra were all good. So there was a point where she kind of resets reality, or she thinks that she resets reality to how it should be. And in doing so, she makes Captain America one of the good guys, or essentially a member of Hydra. So it's kind of a swerve in that, Captain America, Steve Rogers, our Steve Rogers, of course, has not really joined Hydra, but he kind of did in a way because she just changed events of history so that he wasn't mind controlled or anything. It was a real interesting question of nature and nurture because she just changed reality so that as a young, scrawny, skinny kid, he was recruited by Hydra as opposed to the American government. And what became of that was Hydra Cap, and it was a pretty cool story and certainly a prominent WTF EastEnders moment. Next up, we have that mutant master of magnetism. It is Eric Lenscher, Magneto. And what has he done this time? I was tempted to use the time that he was revealed himself as being Zorn. That was kind of cool. Zorn was this sweet, benevolent mutant who had joined the Xavier Academy, and he wore like this metal kind of mask so you couldn't see who was underneath, and it turns out it was Magneto, up to his old tricks again. But the one I'm going to go for is a classic from my 90s sort of upbringing, Uncanny X-Men 350. The whole time we thought that Magneto was in fact Joseph. The last time we saw this Magneto, like the real Magneto, he had had his mind wiped by Professor X, and we assumed that he was in a comatose state, and then he reappeared later on, de-aged, and with a nice new attitude, and that was Joseph. Wrong! Yeah, he was here the whole time, and basically he had been manipulating and conspiring and basically biding his time, ready to wreak his revenge. And eventually he did. He kind of put Gambit on trial and made a whole big deal. He disguised himself as Eric the Red, that was a bit pointless, but it did lead to the big final page reveal as we hear the voiceover of Eric the Red talking to his sort of robotic assistant, and it's like the camera's sort of panning around. I say camera, the comic page, and eventually it pans up. We see the helmet be lifted up with the magnetism, and on it goes, and it is the master of magnetism. Magneto is back. Doom, 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 doom. And then they explain where he's been and who Joseph is, and it becomes more dum, 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 da, da, dum. Going over now to the SpiderMan family, we have the reveal of the mastermind behind the Clone Saga, who was, of course, Norman Osborn, the Green Goblin. Now, this was a big sort of cliffhanger end of episode moment, because for the last 2 years we've all been asking, who is behind the Clone Saga? It was the Jackal. Oh no, wait, it wasn't. It was this guy called Gaunt. Oh no, wait, it wasn't. Someone else was pulling the strings. It was Norman Osborn. The Green Goblin was back. And by this point, we'd kind of accepted in the comic book community, Norman Osborn was almost like an Uncle Ben type figure in that you just couldn't bring him back. How could you bring back Norman Osborn? It's like his death was so sort of iconic. You couldn't possibly, they've gone and done it. But the amazing thing was, in this humble guy's opinion, they did a really good job. I thought it was a great twist. A lot of people thought that it was going to be Harry Osborn. He had died more recently, but then they brought in the Gaunt character, and we thought, maybe Harry is Gaunt. That makes sense. And then it was revealed that he wasn't Gaunt. And it's like, maybe he's the mastermind. Nah. It's his dad. And what a fantastic return to form this was for Norman Osborn, and what a massive reveal at the end of the Clone Saga. Now, when you're talking WTF, soap opera, EastEnders, ending of episode moments, nothing gets bigger than... I can't snap my fingers very well, but you get the idea. It's Thanos with the snap. Before it became like the most famous moment in all of kind of pop culture, it was the biggest moment in crossover comics at the time. The Infinity Gauntlet was first used like in the big major way to essentially destroy half the life in the universe. And unlike the Thanos in the movies, who had a kind of a benevolent sort of, I'm trying to, save everyone type approach, this comic book Thanos wanted to impress Lady Death by simply just destroying and killing as many people. I say as many people as possible, but then wouldn't you have just killed everyone? I'm sure some cleverer person who knows Thanos better can tell me why he only killed half the people in the universe or whatever. But still, that was just not expected, because always in comic books, in stories, the bad guy has an evil plan and the good guys defeat him and stop him. And this was one of those wonderful moments where it's like, I know that's what's supposed to happen. It's not going to happen. No, sorry. The bad guy wins this one. Of course, as we all know, he is ultimately foiled in very different ways from the comics and the movies. But yes, for that one moment, for that one instant in the panel, you could almost hear the sound cue coming in as he snaps the fingers and the good guys lose. Now, this next one is a personal favourite of mine because it hits me right in the nostalgic feels. It is the revelation that the Thunderbolts are in fact the Masters of Evil. This was such a fun reveal to have seen play out in the comic books. So at the end of the Onslaught storyline, the Avengers, the Fantastic Four, the Hulk, Iron Man, all seemingly die. We find out they get blipped into an alternate reality, but as far as the residents of the Marvel 616 are concerned, their core heroes are all dead. But lo and behold, what happens? New, bright, smiling good guys come in to fill their shoes. And the Thunderbolts make a big splash. They kiss the babies and capture the bad guys, and everyone's loving and cheering them. And even Marvel, with their promotional material, are like, here are your new heroes. You will love them. They're the Thunderbolts. Go team. And then at the end of the first issue, oh my God, we get the ultimate reveal where Citizen V, the leader of the team, he's talking to his colleagues. He's telling them how happy he is with their performance. He's disrobing, removes the Citizen V mask, and it's Baron Zemo. And you're like, oh, cue the Chris Pratt face. It's like, this was not what I was expecting. This is a whole revelation and I am here for it. So you could just imagine, like, as an ending to an issue, as a swerve moment, this is solid gold. Now, speaking of big reveals, they don't get much bigger than the identity of Onslaught. Yes, Onslaught was this character who was tormenting the entire Marvel Universe, specifically the X-Men, for the better part of a year in the shadows, operating nefariously. He's communicating with various people in a psychic way and basically just menacing and just setting the scene for what's about to come and kind of warning everyone like, hey, I'm not here yet, but when I choose to make my move, y'all are in trouble. And eventually he did, and it was epic and badass. And of course, the mystery, well, we all knew that was going to happen. The mystery was, well, who is this guy? Who is this evil, all-powerful entity who pimp-slapped the Juggernaut and is going to take over and destroy the Marvel Universe? It is your boy Charlie Xavier. What? Yeah, this was a great revelation and it was done so well also. Oh my goodness. So Xavier had basically been pushed to his limits. Not of like his ability, but just he'd had it. He's like, I am so done with everything. He's seen his dream try to be co-opted and destroyed. He's seen mutants beaten to death in the streets and he can't save them, he can't help them. And eventually he just goes, right, that's it, I've had it. Everyone's gonna die. And it's revealed that he is Onslaught. Now, of course, later on, it's revealed that there's so much more to it than that. And in fact, Onslaught is a combination of his mind and Magneto's. When he wiped Magneto's mind, he absorbed his psyche. And of course, all the bitterness and anger and rage manifested in his head and created this separate entity, which itself is a cool extrapolation of the story. But as a one-moment reveal, this was right up there. Now, circling back to the Spider-Man family, we have Dr. Octopus and his nefarious scheme to take over the body of Peter Parker so that when he dies, which is in the next couple of hours, his mind will live on inside the body of Peter Parker. How is Peter going to stop this? Spoiler, he doesn't. And we get the superior Spider-Man, and that is the biggest revelation. The ending to that issue of Amazing Spider-Man was just so kind of gobsmacking, because you're like, wait a minute, obviously, like, Doc Ock's not going to win, Peter Parker's not going to actually die. Oh yeah, that's it. There's no sort of surprise, like, swerve out the back door. Dr. Octopus becomes, come on, focus for me. You're not going to focus, are you? I'm trying to find the best ways of doing these things, and I kind of duck my head down so that it doesn't see my head and instead focuses on the guy here, but it doesn't always work. So either way, that's what happens. Superior Spider-Man is Doc Ock. His mind is inside Peter's body, and he's won. Peter's psyche is apparently dead. It died with Doc Ock's body, and now Dr. Octopus is the new Superior Spider-Man. And as an insane ending to an issue and to a story, they don't come more insane than that. Now, we all love the story of the grizzled old gunslinger who's seen too much death and refuses to raise his iron again. And everyone's like, oh, why? What was it that made you swear never to do that again? And that's the revelation we get with Old Man Logan. Now, this is a story that has quickly gained like sort of classic notoriety and love in the comics, because it was just so well told, and it was such an interesting take on the post-apocalyptic kind of future. We've seen plenty of post-apocalyptic futures in the Marvel Universe, but of course the classic question was, why? Why is Wolverine refusing to unsheath his claws? And oh, the actual ultimate reveal is one heck of a kicker. I'm gonna see if I can get him to stand. All right, there we go. He's an old man. He needs to lean against someone. So what happened? Finally, the villains of the Marvel Universe got their act together and were like, you know what? Let's work together and actually just win for once. And ultimately it was Mysterio who was the guy to orchestrate all of this coming to fruition. You see, Quentin Beck, the master of illusions, essentially tricked Wolverine into murdering the entire X-Men team. He cast these illusions and spells with some mental manipulation as well, and made Wolverine think that all of his friends and loved ones were being attacked and killed by his evil enemies and whatnot. So he goes to town, berserker rage, destroys, gut slashes, and kills everyone, only to be revealed, Swerve, you've actually murdered all your friends. And that is what happened in the old Man Logan story. Clearly one of the darker timelines of the Marvel Universe. Not quite Ruins dark, but it's still a pretty bleak story to tell. But my goodness, what I loved about that Swerve was the fact that it was Mysterio. Like someone who's, not even B-list? Maybe B-list, but he's the guy who always gets punched out by Spider-Man and just thrown in regular jail like a schmuck. And this is the guy who basically destroyed the world and all the hopes and dreams of the good guys. Old Quentin Beck here. Now that is a Swerve. Our penultimate EastEnders revelation is that one of the Avengers, one of the founding Avengers, has been an agent of Kang all along. That's right, it is Tony Stark, Iron Man. I know what you're thinking, what the hell? This guy, Tony Stark, like the main man in Marvel, like the king of the Marvel Universe, he was working for the bad guys all along? Hey, the 90s were a weird time, okay? So yes, Tony Stark, apparently it turns out, in a story called The Crossing, was being manipulated and mind controlled by Kang the Conqueror all this time. It was kind of subconscious, it was against his will, but ultimately he was a pawn, an agent of this blue-faced goon. So what happened essentially in the storyline that the Crossing, this is all revealed, it all comes out, and it's like, oh my goodness. So what the Avengers do is they go back in time, they play Kang at his own game, and they recruit a young teenaged Tony Stark, and they bring him into the future. And I'm going slightly cross-eyed thinking about how that all works, but they replace the old Stark with the young one. So the older Stark, as often happens with these kind of redemption type storylines, he sort of breaks his programming and ultimately sacrifices himself to save everyone else. And then young Tony Stark takes over the role as Iron Man. And I can honestly understand it. Like, it sounds stupid. Like, why would you get rid of Tony Stark? He's Robert Downey Jr. It's like, no. In the 90s, he wasn't so much that character. And it was getting harder, I think, for readers to really kind of like empathize with and be interested in Iron Man. In the 90s, everything was young and cool and hip. You had over at DC, because I don't know why it's always DC that comes to mind, but you had, Superboy, and Green Lantern became a young guy, and it was a youth movement, and a middle-aged rich guy, it just didn't have that appeal. So instead they went for the youth movement, replacing older Tony Stark with younger Tony Stark, which ultimately ties into the Onslaught story, because it was young Tony Stark who got blipped out of reality, and then when all the heroes came back, without really any explanation, it was fully grown Tony Stark who returned, and all was right with the world. And speaking of all being right with the world, in our final big EastEnders revelation, Nundior, what the F moment, we have Spider-Man being revealed as the clone. This one was a big one. You see this with this type of video I'm doing now with this camera, I do this sort of thing where I look away from the camera so it doesn't focus on my face, and instead you can see the figure. I hope this is like an effective way of doing videos. Let me know what you think, or if it's kind of distracting to see me glancing away all the time. You're like, oh my goodness, that's what Dave looks like from the side. Where have you been hiding that nose? Anyway, so of course, speaking of all being right with the world, there was a time in the mid-90s when Ben Reilly was hugely prominently featured in the Spider-Man comics. He was featured as much as Peter Parker himself. He was the clone who came back from exile and was trying to make a life for himself back in New York. Or at least he wasn't trying at the time, he was just trying to sort of survive. But it was ultimately revealed in a shocking twist that this whole time, 5 years in the comics, 25 years in reality, or maybe 20 years, we had actually been reading the stories of the clone of Peter Parker. This Peter Parker was the clone. This one was the real one. And this wasn't like a 2-issue or 6-issue storyline swerve. This was Marvel going, no, this is it. All right, you better get used to this. No takesies, backsies. Yeah, right. But that was the big revelation, because they finally got to the point, the two characters, where they were like, look, we need to just solve this once and for all. Let's do the tests ourselves and we'll figure this out. And lo and behold, it was revealed that Ben Reilly was the real Peter Parker, and Peter goes cuckoo bananas, starts attacking Ben Reilly. Mary Jane tries to get him off and he turns around and backhands her, not realizing it was her. Important point. And of course, he sees what he's done and he just runs off into the night like, it was a huge, shocking moment. And Mary Jane's just left there being like, Peter, don't go. And I swear I could hear the EastEnders theme tune in my head right then. Tune in next week, because all bets are off. Folks, that was my top 10 soap opera, EastEnders, WTF, Nandayor, what the hell endings in comics. What do you think? What are some of your craziest revelations in comic books? What do you think of sort of the style of me kind of doing this like a list display kind of thing with my dumbass looking away from the camera to try and get things working? Does that work for you? Or are you like, Dave, that's just go back. We don't like change. So either way, comment below, let me know. If you like what you're seeing here and you want to see more, join the 6-1 Clicks by clicking the like, share, and subscribe buttons. And if you really like what you see, go over to patreon.com/display model behavior, throw a few Marvel bucks my way, helps keep the lights on. And before I go, I leave you with a data blast, the best things on Instagram. Check the names of the creators, give them a follow, because they deserve recognition for the amazing work they do. And until next time, keep displaying model behavior.
Choose.